the end of faith, you said you started writing it the day after September 11th. And at the end of this, you were talking about how we should be consistent in our compassion for genocide and for large amounts of slaughter. So I guess I was wondering, what was it specifically about September 11th which led you to start on this?
Well, I spent a lot of time thinking about religion, reading religious books, studying meditation. I was very interested in religious experience. I had been for well over a decade at that point. And I was also studying belief at the level of the brain, or getting ready to in my neuroscience PhD. And so I was sort of I was interested in the terrain. And when September 11th happened, people began to immediately deny that this had anything to do with religion, this phenomenon of people flying planes into buildings. Well-educated people, all college-educated, many of them had PhDs. And we were telling ourselves it had nothing to do with religion, and in addition, we were telling ourselves that the only way to sort of console ourselves is to reiterate our own religious myths. So you had a real sort of Christian populist message happening. And then I began to see that it was looking like faith was going to be playing both sides of the board in a very dangerous game. You had Bush talking about a crusade, and that was interpreted quite invidiously in the Muslim world, as was no surprise. And so the issue of religious, the consequences of believing bad ideas, specifically religious bad ideas, became exquisitely relevant to me. And then I just decided, the moment it became obvious that this was Islamic violence and we weren't going to call a spade, I started writing The End of Faith.
I enjoyed your talk. I suppose in fairness to the Catholic Church, those who are spreading HIV, the faith the Church is teaching in the first place about monogamy. There might be far fewer AIDS cases. But my question is about this idea of moral genius. In your TED talk, I think you showed a slide of Edward Whitton, the physicist. A lot of physicists would agree with that. It's certainly one of the geniuses of today in the physics world. So what's the analogy in the human behavioral world? I suppose it would be saints, right? I mean, that's the definition of moral genius. And saints, they're all different. So you solve the problem of sort of blandness, or sort of a new world, or brave new world problem of everybody being exactly the same if it was scientifically determined moral behavior.
Well, they're not all different in the relevant sense. What I take a saint to be, and again, this concept is confounded with a lot of religious dogmatism, but I mean, I've met great and studied with truly great contemplatives, people who spent decades in caves meditating and just on compassion. And you meet people like this, and it's rather obvious that it's possible to be profoundly non-neurotic and profoundly unconcerned about what other people think of you, and really just have a remarkably high wattage interest in alleviating the suffering of other people. And so, any saint who's going to pass muster in terms of my view of morality is someone who is, one, not suffering for bad reasons. I mean, someone who's non-neurotic, who has his or her priorities straight, and is actually just not tending to fall prey to the sort of zero-sum selfishness that we recognize in ourselves and in so many others. And so they're very interesting moments when you see someone succeed. Someone perhaps in your same line of work, or there's someone in your lab, you see someone really just something great happens to them. Most of us are rather slow to feel genuine sympathetic joy for their success. We tend to feel like we have been diminished by their success. So envy and sort of the antithesis of sympathetic joy. And that's a very completely unnecessary source of suffering, really, in the end. And it's so much nicer to actually want people to be happy, and when they are happy, to feel happy because they're happy. I mean, there's kind of a virtuous circle there that can happen. And a saint really has that to a remarkable degree. And when you're with these people, you recognize you're in the presence of someone who's running a slightly different piece of software, and it's quite liberating.
Well, I thought this was an incredibly successful event. We had about 700 people here, but more importantly, I think we provoked a lot of thought tonight. I think that we achieved our mission tonight, which is to really get the entire broader Harvard community talking about issues of humanism, atheism, agnosticism, and ethics and morality. I think Sam did a great job of setting the tone for a conversation that a lot of these students are going to take a long way, and a lot of the students in here, you know, have a chance to be the next Sam Harris or the next important humanist philosopher. So I'm just happy to have them learning from him. The issue is not that everybody in our community agrees with everything that Sam had to say tonight, because that's not how humanism works. We brought Sam in because he is thinking about issues related to humanism, and he's very articulate and he's provoking thought. In terms of the relationship between the religious and the non-religious community, and Sam's very well-known positions on some of those issues, I think it's important to recognize that what the humanist chaplaincy at Harvard is doing, is involved in doing, is driven to do, is to represent both sides of what I think is a very, very two-sided situation, which is that on the one hand, those of us who are interested in humanism have really legitimate, in my opinion at least, very legitimate critiques to make of some of what happens in the name of religion, some of what happens in religious texts, some of what happens in religious communities, etc. But on the other hand, there is a lot of good that people who define themselves as religious, whether we agree with how they define themselves or not, people who define themselves as religious do many good things, and we're happy to collaborate with them on those good things. So, the idea is not to have this sort of zero-sum game or false dichotomy between, well, you can either criticize religion or religious people, or you can embrace religion and religious people. No. When something happens in the name of religion that is deserving of criticism, we criticize it as humanists. And when something happens in the name of religion that is good, that is worth praising, that is worth teaming up with and worth collaborating with, we do that. And so tonight we had an event that was maybe one side of that coin, but the other side is equally there. And we can collaborate. We can collaborate between different kinds of humanists, and we can collaborate between humanists and religious people. We can do both. And so I'm excited that tonight maybe could be an example for some who didn't understand that to learn a little bit more about our approach.